Everyone, welcome to another Random Talk Sunday. Apologize, this video is to unfortunately be delayed. I was pretty busy throughout this past week and did not have time to upload videos until now, or at least get caught up with uploading videos until now. So, without further ado, let me address what I wanted to address for this Random Talk Sunday, and I thought I would go over my personal favorites of 2015, and yes, the hat is still for celebration of the new year. And that'll be the last time I'll be wearing this hat. So, without further ado, though, there were a lot of, I think, actually good movies throughout this year. It wasn't like a stellar year, but at the same time, I don't think it was one of those dud years where there was kind of nothing going on. I felt like there was some genuine filmmaking that was going on, and there seemed to be some interesting and unique stories that came out this year, whether they be re recapturing something that was already in existence, or telling a new story and continuing on a series of films, or whether they be just standalones, in particular historically oriented films. We got a lot of history oriented films, or films that are kind of based on true stories throughout this year. Obviously, there were a lot of okayers and I think a lot of duds. Um, so I'm just going to kind of go over which ones I thought were the most enjoyable, at least for me, within this year, and the ones that I personally enjoyed the most throughout the year, and kind of go into my explanation as to why I enjoyed them. Excuse me. Some of them I have talked about, and some of them I haven't talked about, but I'll try to kind of go over the ones that I've talked already about a little bit quicker. Um, First one being the Peanuts movie. I did not see Inside Out actually. So again, I am fairly limited because I haven't seen a significant amount of films throughout this year. But from what I was exposed to, I was fairly impressed. But um, the only animated film that I did see was the Peanuts movie, and this technically makes it win the best of the animated films that I've seen. And I personally thought that it was rather enjoyable to watch. There was a lot of what you would come to expect from the Peanuts, but still fairly updated. And I kind of liked how they tried to go with a more balanced interpretation as opposed to the more kind of downtrodden, kind of uh, you know sad kind of Peanuts that I think a lot of people have already been exposed to over and over again. Because it's nice to see this sort of change up and have a little bit of more of a balance as far as the emotions. And it was a very, I think, really, I would just say a very well done animated product. And the animation looked even nice too in 3D. I mean, because even though it updated it into 3D, you still felt the 2D aspects shine through. And I just thought that that was just something that was just so unique and interesting about this particular film, and just the way that they had the story, which was just fairly simple, but then yet so interesting and engaging because you really like the characters, you really want to get to know them, and you really want to see what ultimately happens to them and what Charlie Brown ends up accomplishing or not accomplishing. And uh, I did talk about this film in one of my previous videos more extensively, so I kind of don't want to sort of repeat myself here, but um, overall, if it just gave off, I think, a really good impression because, with all of these other animated films um, trying to do something new, but at the same time, you know, again, being they focusing more on the CGI and um, on the the crazy spectacle of animation. I like how this particular film sort of goes back to this older school roots, but still maintains a certain level of updatedness to it. And it left me with a good overall impression of it. I thought it was very cute, very likable, and just fun and pleasant, like a very little pleasant innocent movie. And even if it's rated G, it still has this. It gives you the fuzzy feels inside. At least it did for me. So um, I personally thought it was a standout as far as animation, and definitely ones that are trying to recapture that magic that existed with the previous um, Peanuts movies or Peanuts shorts back in the day. And considering the fact that we've had so many other films that have tried to, recapture the imagination of what was originally there, it's nice to see one that really attempts it well. And that's why I think overall I was even more so impressed with this movie, because it definitely could have gone completely in the wrong direction. Second movie that I want to briefly mention, and one that I really did enjoy and I thought was really well done, uh, is the movie Bridge of Spies, starring Tom Hanks. This has a lot of interesting history to it, and it's nice to see Tom Hanks back in a movie again. I don't think I've seen him in a film for quite some time, actually. And what I think works about this film is the way in which they tell the story, which it is a really interesting story. And since I am such a history kind of buff, or I guess nerd, you could say, it really intrigued me when I initially, because I did want to see it for a long time, but then I didn't get around to it until a while later. But it is a very nice. It's really well produced, and uh, what really does make it work is again Tom Hanks's character, the insurance lawyer that he plays, because he is very determined. He is very, he does not give in. He does not give up against the Soviets. He really pushes for what he wants. And I think that's something that I think our politicians should learn. You know, learn from those good old times when we were fighting the Soviets. Um, so, but in case you're not familiar, since I didn't touch upon this film because I didn't have the privilege of seeing it until recently, it's basically about this insurance lawyer who's initially given a supposed Soviet spy, which I guess he technically really was. He's sort of given the job of defending this spy in court. So he's basically tried sort of for treason, so to speak, um, because he was kind of living in America and, um, taking advantage of our liberties, but then at the same time spying for communists. So in Russia. So he definitely ends up being exposed to a lot of people who really do not like him for defending a Soviet spy. But I mean, the way in which our court system in the United States works is everybody has a defense. It doesn't matter, who you are, just as long as just just as long as supposedly you committed or not committed a crime, you deserve a trial. And you really do see the culture of the time period and how people really were really, again, they were really strong against the Soviet Union, and they really against Russia, because these were really competing. We were competing powers, the United States and Russia at the time, and you really do see that impacted. You really do see the impact really well handled within this film. And you really do see how Tom Hanks is so determined to get it right, that he even sort of retries the case at one point since it doesn't turn out in his favor initially. And again, he's just so determined to do what he believes is right and within context of the law that he doesn't really ultimately care what anybody has to say. Um, and you'll kind of see how it's funny how it turns on its head eventually later on within the ending of the film, and how everybody is really happy with him. At first they hate him, and then they love him. It's like we don't like you, Tom Hanks, in the beginning of this movie, but at the end you're good with us. Because eventually you'll see how one of our spies in the United States gets shot down because he's taking some pictures apparently the of what's going on in the Soviet Union. And once his plane gets shut down, he gets taken captured by the Soviets. And so Tom Hanks' character has to sort of handle the exchange between the spy that he was initially defending and a American spy who's technically a pilot, because he was flying a plane and taking pictures. And also there is another person that Tom Hanks wants to eventually set free. He's this university student that was an American who was taken by the I guess the way in which the whole the whole governments were operated, I guess, like when you're looking at East Germany, and it actually shows them actually building the wall at one point, and it shows it really well. Like you really do feel the uh, hostility and the sort of isolation and the almost the kind of desperation too a little bit of the people during the time, and how they just have this wall that's going up and everybody's kind of trying to run out before the wall gets built. And uh, eventually the one of these university students gets taken, and Tom Hanks wants to bring both the spy and the university student back home to the United States. Um, and uh, and again, the East German government supposedly has the university student, and then the Soviets have the obviously the American spy, and obviously the American government doesn't care about the university student. They just want their spy back. Um, but Tom Hanks is like, no, I want both. I want the university student, and I want the kid to come back. And he's doing it because he thinks it's right. And I like the idea because I think that's a lot of what our American ideals are. They are of doing the right thing. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's no, I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to keep insisting. And you really do see the negotiation process and how Tom Hanks really tries to convince these people to let the two go somehow, and you ultimately see what ends up happening, and how that ends up resulting if you choose to watch the film. But it's a really well constructed film and it really does pay tribute to the history of this period of within the 50s, because sometimes we like to think of the 50s as, oh, it was just a fun little time. Yeah, it was a fun little time, but there was also a lot of dark elements to it that were going on, at least within the context of world politics, that no one kind of really talks about. And it's sort of great just to see people's mindsets, at least back in that day, and see them really translated well within this film. And I was just really impressed by it. I mean, even though it is relatively long, you see, since me enjoying history and enjoying these kinds of things, and enjoying these kinds of commentaries on the politics and stuff, it was a real treat to watch, and I felt really engaged throughout, and I thought it was very interesting um, and a worthy treat. So if you have not seen this film, I would definitely recommend it. I personally enjoyed the way in which they approached it overall. And I think that's ultimately all I can say about that film. Another film that I really enjoyed actually was Mission Impossible. Rogue Nation. Yeah, I don't care if this is a new Mission Impossible movie. This still was a pretty good Mission Impossible movie. It's kind of funny how like the second one was the dud of the series, and now it's just kind of coming back, and Tom Cruise is coming back. But man, I mean, it was a really enjoyable ride. I mean, this was a very impressive one to say the least. I thoroughly enjoyed it throughout. I would actually say I actually enjoyed it more than Spectre, actually. I thought this was actually a better um, this was the better spy movie. Well, technically, movie just about a spy, not involving spies, but just one spy, really. Um, Tom Cruise's character. I thought that overall it presented itself well within the story. There was a lot of action, but it was well paced and well choreographed, and just a lot of things ultimately end up happening within this film that you do feel the sort of tension, and you feel the weight of what the characters are going through. And it was very entertaining. It was smart entertainment. I think this was more of a smarter popcorn movie. And again, although I did like Spectre, I just didn't feel like it didn't impress me as much as Skyfall did, unfortunately. So um, I would have to say Mission Impossible was more of the one that I liked more so, um, and enjoyed more of, and liked really watching, because I think it knew how to balance the dark as well as the lighter tones to it. And I did actually review this one, so it's in another video that I have. So if you want to know more about that particular film, I would definitely recommend checking that video out, because I don't want to overly repeat myself. um, Second to last film that I really enjoyed this year, Mad Max: Fury Road. Yeah, it was fun to watch. It was entertaining to watch. There was just a lot of well done action set pieces. I felt that there was actually a genuine humanness, at least a human element to the characters. Um, yeah, is Charlize Theron's character a little bit too hard heavy? Yeah, I would argue yes, but at the same time, I didn't feel like she was like the big star. Like they didn't put her on like a pedestal, I felt. And I thought overall the entire presentation of the the film within it of itself, and how it sort of shows things visually to the audience, was actually very clever, and had a lot of meaning and context behind it, especially within the beginning of this film. And I did briefly talk about this film in another video, so if you have not seen this film, feel free to check out my review of it that I did on of it, because I don't want to again repeat myself. uh, but definitely the action-packed movie of the year, to say the least. Fairly entertaining and very engaging, and overall I thought it was good, and I didn't feel like it was trying to sell me really anything. More so, it was just trying to have fun with itself, and I think that overall worked. And lastly, I would say definitely the Hateful Eight is probably one of my favorites this year, because I thought it was a better installment from Quentin Tarantino. Like I don't think we've seen too many new films come out of him that I think have been as interesting or original as this one, and it was a treat to watch. It was entertaining, it was interesting and engaging, and it had a lot of grit to it, and it had um, a lot of interesting elements to it. And I personally had a good time watching it, and I did do a review of it in one of my previous videos, so I don't want to give too much away again of what ultimately happens, but these are just my personal favorites. I'm sure there's others that people would like more so. I didn't put Star Wars up here because although I did enjoy it, I think I'm going to enjoy a lot more of the side stories that they're going to come up with, and I'm going to enjoy a lot more of the next installments of these three trilogy, or the trilogy that they're trying to do. I honestly think that there's a lot of it set itself up to have a lot more interesting material, unfortunately. So that's why I think it discouraged me from putting it as my personal favorite, because although I did find a lot to enjoy from it, I still had certain amounts of disappointment with it. And at the same time, I just thought that um, it was good. I just think that it's leading up to something better. So maybe it'll come around next year. I'm not sure when the next film's supposed to be coming up, but that'll be interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see the side projects that they do, where they can really dive into the lore and we can get a lot more interesting things out of it, I think. But that's, yeah, ultimately all I can say, though, about my personal favorites. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and a happy new year. And goodbye.